Welcome back, everyone, to Fantasy Football's Weather Guys. We are here with Season 1, Episode 3. It's Week 1 of NFL. Let's get ready. Let's put out our weather report. That's why we're here, for you guys. So, again, I appreciate all the love we're seeing on social media. We got about 220 likes in the first week on our Facebook page. Thank you. That was wonderful. We want to keep that up. Again, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at FFWeatherguys. Again, you're here watching us on YouTube. There's going to be a link somewhere. I'll put it there when I learn how to figure it out. And you can subscribe, hit the notification button, and we want to, build our audience. So we're going to get right to it. There's going to be last thing before I forget, links all will be in descriptions of our social media. Thank you again. And we're going to get into Week 1 weather report. So we are seeing 4 games, if you saw on our website that we posted yesterday, that we have some caution. We're going to start in the West Coast, particularly with the Seahawks-Bengals game. Sean, why don't you tell us what we're seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Collin. So the weather that we're looking at for any type of fantasy impact is going to be focused in on the West Coast. And the game that I want to focus on first is that Seattle-Cincinnati game. So it's at Seattle. And right now our synoptic setup, so what we're looking at there is kind of the placement of where the highs and low pressures are. And we know low pressure brings potentially rain and wind, and high pressure is usually pretty nice weather, pretty fair weather. And we have an upper level disturbance influencing the Intermountain West and Northwest U.S. And what we're looking at here is precipitation that's going to be influencing Seattle through game time. So basically this is looking at the accumulation from essentially noon through around 6 p.m. So this game is set to be at 4 o'clock Eastern time. And it looks like, based on our forecast, that it could rain at a moderate rate for the duration of that game. So Mike will talk a little bit later on about what kind of fantasy impacts that may have on fantasy players. The other game that I wanted to bring up is the Oakland game. That's being played against the Broncos. And what we're looking at here is this is not a rain issue. This is a wind. So what we're looking at here is essentially a wind map. And the area I want to focus on, if you can see my cursor here, is over California, over the Bay Area. And it looks like we're forecasting winds to potentially reach at times 15 to 20 miles per hour, which based on our model and our calculations could have a pretty considerable influence for the game for Monday night. So this game is on Monday night. So I'm going to send it back over to Collin, where you can give us some further updates.
Thank you, Sean. So like we said, we are looking at some rain in the Seattle Bengals game on Sunday afternoon. And then on Monday night, we're going to there's some wind impacts. Mike, can you talk us through what we could potentially see from a fantasy football performance?
Yeah, sure. So I think we should start off with the Bengals at Seahawks. Anytime there's moderate rain with risk of maybe some light to moderate wind, it's always something to me that screams you should start your running backs, right? These guys coaches will tend to hand off or play call more so in the favor of the running backs. And some of the statistics that we've seen here is that these guys, speaking specifically for the running backs there, could be about a 3% increase in some of their activity carries per game. I really want to focus on Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett, right? These are where most people are drafting these guys and starting them in week 1. So typically when in these games where there's rain and wind, we often see a reduction in production by quarterbacks. And we're looking at around a 5% reduction here for Russell Wilson. And while that might not be trivial, Russell Wilson's probably going to throw, I'm saying, less than 200 yards in this game, right? I'm looking at somewhere in between 175, 180 yards total for yards in passing. I still think he's going to get a couple touchdowns, but that is enough for me for a 1-point reduction in his total performance. And that pushes Russell Wilson outside of my top 12 for this week, excuse me.
So what about Chris Carson?
Yeah, so with Chris Carson, the increased frequency in touches in this game, I think we're looking at a running back here inside the top 10 or top 15. I think that there's a good chance here going against a not so great Bengals defense for Carson to score at least one or 2 touchdowns.
What about from the Bengals' perspective? Do you see having any significant impact? I know the stats would be the same from player performance, but would you say that the starters of Bengals, probably aren't in most people's top 10 anyway?
Yeah, so the one starter, or I would say there's a couple starters that folks are probably going to be interested in with the Bengals side. Obvious choice is Joe Mixon, right? Another workhorse running back. He is going against Seattle at home. You know that the Bengals are going to fall behind here. So I'm not trying to go rush out to start him. Though that being said, with the potential increase in usage there, he will get volume in this game. I'm just going to stray away from the actual weather impacts as well as being a home game in Seattle. It's a tough stadium to play in.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's shift. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I just wanted to, go. And one thing I was kind of thinking about, Mike, about this game is one thing with Russell Wilson. I do agree with you from a passing standpoint, especially on the line. The linemen are not as sure-footed. He may not have as much time. One thing that Russell Wilson has been known for in the past is his ability to be a mobile quarterback. So one of the questions is do you think he may make up for some of that, maybe with his mobility and up in those rushing yards? We saw a decline in that last year a little bit. Maybe he picks it up back this year in the first game.
Yeah, so if he is going to run, this would be a game where you will actually start to see him do that. And I think that we'll get a sense of what his floor will be there when it comes to his rushing attempts per game.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what it's all about, is looking at hey, what is Russell Wilson's floor this year? We've seen those blockbuster years. We've also seen a dip here and there as well. But I'm definitely with you on this. I think the odds are stacked in the favor of Seattle as opposed to Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati has definitely more of a difficult route in this game with the weather at Seattle.
Yeah, and especially if Seattle gets out in ahead of this game, I'm fading guys like Tyler Lockett, right, or DK Metcalf. I mean, Tyler Lockett's projected in my with regards to the weather here, I would take off about 5 to 10 yards in just receiving yards. That puts him below 60 yards. So you're really banking on that touchdown here from Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, consistent with last year, boomer bust, TD wide receiver. We'll see if he can make up with some more yards this year. But this first game, it's still a big question mark with that rain coming. So
great conversation. Let's move on to the other game that was on our top 2, the Broncos Raiders. Mike, wind.
Yeah, so I'm actually seeing winds of greater than 15 miles per hour at the start of the game. It does look like the winds will start to subside though in the second half. So if there's going to be any impacts on production, I do think it's going to be in that first half. So when you talk about impacts here, looking at the quarterback situation, Derek Carr, Joe Flacco, I don't think many people are actually starting these guys. If you're in a deep league or a 2-quarterback league, then you might have an option there. You're looking at them. I would tend to shy away, especially with some of the recent news and buzz going on with the Antonio Brown situation. But I think
we'll get to that in a second, Mike. Don't spoil the party.
Okay, fair enough. I won't do that here. But something that this does bring in light here, if Antonio Brown does sit, right? Tyrell Williams, this is someone that I really didn't target all that much as a wideout too. He was good in the Chargers, but I had my fear of him and how he'll mesh with Carr. I think Tyrell Williams might be a pretty good, sneaky good play here. Even though the wind might be a factor in the first half, they're going to be throwing, right? And I think Tyrell Williams might be that guy to get those targets.
Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially if that wind is whipping, those coaches may be more reluctant to go to that kicking game. We know that kickers can be adversely affected by wind, and especially early on. And if that wind does continue throughout the game, I think they're going to be maybe taking some chances on third down if they're on the opponent's side of the field. So I would be targeting here. I think Josh Jacobs gets off to a really good start. I think they're going to feed him the ball early and often, especially if that wind looks like it's going to be having any impact at all.
Okay, great. So there were 2 other games that we put on our website that we did have a caution next to, and it really wasn't for precipitation or wind. It's the other factor, temperature, and it's the Florida games for heat.
Yeah, so this is something that we talked about adding here, and we're looking at this as a perspective here of just being uncomfortable when in all those pads. And in temperatures that are looking to be around 90 degrees Fahrenheit with dew point temperature, which is essentially a measure of moisture in the atmosphere, right around the near 70 or lower 70s. So this puts a feels like temperature of around 95 or 96 degrees Fahrenheit. That's tough when you're a workhorse running back. And where I really wanted to focus this discussion specifically was Mark Ingram, right? A lot of people drafted Mark Ingram as one of their top 2 or top 3 running backs. There was a conception there that he was probably going to be a workhorse. And as you start to read through the tea leaves here recently, there's some indications here that there might be more of a committee here. Baltimore might go with the hot hand. And with these temperatures and humidity factors in Sunday's game, I wouldn't be surprised to see that more of an even split load here with Mark Ingram and the other running backs, Justice Hill, or even Gus the Bus Edwards on Sunday.
Sean, do you have anything you want to talk about on this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Mike. I think if we're going to see that rotation, we're going to see it this game. I think they want to feed the ball to multiple backs in Baltimore. And I think this is it's early on in the season. You don't want to tire out your running backs. You have 3 valuable options there. Why not give it to Gus the Bus Edwards and Justice Hill? Give them a chance to get in acclimated, and that puts some of the pressure off of Mark Ingram in that game, especially with that heat. So, I'm definitely on board with Mike here that if you're looking for Mark Ingram to be, a 25-plus touch guy this week, that may not happen.
Well, I just want to say Gus the Bus to join the fun, but I never thought I'd say that on camera. So I think that kind of wraps up our weather discussion, unless Mike or Sean have any other points that they want to highlight before we move on to the news that Mike so subtly or not so subtly hinted at.
I think the only other point here is the 49ers at Buccaneers game. This is a 4:25 Eastern time game. We are expecting similar conditions there in Tampa. So that being said, both teams are likely to use a running back by committee approach here. So I'm not really seeing any significant downgrades to the running backs there.
Sean, anything?
No, nothing. I think we covered it. And we may also, just for reference, update some of these weather projections as we get closer to the time of the games. If there's something that comes up that wasn't resolved in the models initially, we'll be sure to update you Friday, Saturday.
Right, and that's why, once again, you need to follow us on our social media and our website, fantasyfootballweatherguys.weebly.com. And our handles on our social media is FFWeatherguys for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So moving on to the news. Mike, do you want to take over what you want to talk about first?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned it. So the cat's out of the bag, surprise. There's a ton of buzz going on right now. Today, breaking news with regards to Antonio Brown and how there may be a looming suspension. This is really bad news for folks who drafted Antonio Brown either in the first or second rounds. In our league together, we know he was actually kept as a keeper, which now puts significant doubt on his season as it's already, we're week 1 here. If he actually gets suspended for code of conduct, by the Raiders organization, that's a tremendous blow on his value. I mean, I don't have any shares of him this year in my leagues, and I'm happy about that right now. But I mean, this is some serious news here for a wide receiver who's been drafted as a wideout 1.
Yeah, I mean, and we're still not completely sure the details of this news, if he will be suspended for how long. There was some issues with upper-level management. But let me tell you, I want no part of Antonio Brown, at least at this point early on in the year. He had an issue with his foot when he was getting therapy done on his foot. He obviously is giving off the message that he does not want to be in Oakland. And he's being very kind of controversial to the team and being a part of that team. So what does that mean? Well, if, I know for me, I'm going to be looking at some of my leagues. Is Williams available? Tyrell Williams available? Because I think he could be a potential breakout here that was low on people's draft boards if this news does come to fruition and Antonio Brown is out the door in some way or fashion. So, yeah, I'm looking at Tyrell Williams.
So, Sean, a question for you. Tyrell Williams, this is obviously a guy that you might start to consider trading for, right? If you have the depth in your team, what type of level of player are you considering to trade for him? Are you looking at maybe some of those mid-tier or lower-tier running backs, like your second running back, your third running back? Or are you thinking maybe it's still too much of a risk here to really kind of put that type of capital into a trade?
I mean, I think my point is I think it's a little bit early because we don't exactly know. And that also depends on team construction. For me, in almost every league, I went running back heavy. I try to get those pass catchers. So I do have some depth at running back where I need to give up a piece. Like potentially, if this news comes out that he is going to be suspended, even for a couple games, whatever it may be, I'm willing to give up like a Matt Breida potentially or a Singletary with that breakout potential, especially since, quite frankly, my wide receivers are struggling a little bit. I'm willing to take that shot on a Tyrell Williams and him potentially connecting with Carr and having a good year.
So I got to move to the other piece of news that I wanted to get to because we mentioned it in our last video. Zeke signed $15 million a year, $50 million guaranteed over, I think it was, 6 years, 7 years? 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, so that's big news.
Big news, big money.
That's right. In one of my leagues, it moved my power ranking up twice just because he was on my bench and he got signed. So I think everyone's excited to see that. I think the holdout, it had a purpose for him. I won't get into my personal feelings about it on this video, but I'm happy for football and fantasy football fans to have a player like him playing.
Yeah, and this was a huge issue, right? People debating, do I draft Tony Pollard? Like, what do I do with Pollard? Does he play? How many weeks is Zeke out? He fully admitted he wanted the money. He wanted to be one of the, if not the highest paid running back. And guess what? Now he is. You know what? He's now with his team. I don't anticipate there being any lingering effects. I think he's going to be the same old Zeke. I anticipate him to get, that pass catching ability that he's always had, and he's going to continue on. So Collin mentioned, hey, everyone's interested. Everyone's happy. I'm not. I play 2 people my first week who have Zeke. So I was honestly hoping that he was going to be out and kind of banking on that, and that's not the case. So, again, but good for Zeke. He got the deal done. A lot of people can stop sweating because it's done. He's going to be there. He's going to play. He's the feature back. And I can't imagine Pollard anything more than, a lingering handcuff, maybe, if you have the bench spot. But
so when we talked about this last time, right, I said, if I was drafting 4 or 3, I would go for Zeke, and I stayed true to my word. In both of my leagues that I was number 3 draft pick, I was lucky enough to make that risk and gamble to go for Zeke. Held my word true. I'm pumped he's back. I'm looking forward to his production. I am a little worried about week 1. I'm interested to see how many snaps he actually gets. There's some speculation he may share it a little bit Pollard for a little while, but you know what? I'm starting him. I'm going out. It's going to be a great year for Zeke. Looking forward to it.
I agree. Sean, let me correct myself. It caused a lot of emotions with everyone. Mostly happy for the other 2 of us on this video.
We'll just stick with emotions. Emotions is probably the best way of putting it, whether that be good, bad, sad, happy. There were definitely emotions flowing. And it is what it is. I just gotta, for me, I'm playing him in 2 or 3 leagues this week where he's starting. So let's go.
I'm excited. Let's go tonight. I don't know when this video is going to drop, so hopefully my plan is to get it out before the game. But again, maybe the Packers-Bears are playing by the time you see this, or it's tomorrow morning on Friday. Either way, like we've said before, we're going to try to keep our weather forecast updated throughout the weekend on our website at fantasyfootballweatherguys.weebly.com. Social media is the best way to stay up to date with us. We are FFWeatherguys. And again, there will be a link down here somewhere, I forget where I'm going to put it, to subscribe. Click that notification button. We're also going to have our video from last week. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we end this video and get to week 1?
No, hey, good luck. Hey, this is the fantasy football players. This is the best time of year. You're into your draft. You finish your drafts. You want to see, hey, what do I have this year? You're waiting for those games, those players to break out. It's a super exciting time of year. So best of luck to everybody out there. And hopefully the players you pick end up breaking out.
The last thing I would like to add here is we also are, we're converting these videos here to sound bites. So we are putting these, we do have areas you can subscribe to on Castbox or iTunes to our podcast. So make sure to look at FF Weather Guys on those platforms as well.
That's a great recommendation, Mike. So, Sean, I'm going to throw you a curveball. You and I are playing in our league this week. Should we do a side bet so everyone can see what happens?
Oh, a side bet. What do you propose, Collin? What's your side bet?
I don't know, that I get to name your team for a week, and we have to tell what that name is on our next video.
All right, fine. I'll do that. So if it's the name of the team for 1 week, we'll do that. We'll do that for our league that we're in, and we'll see what happens.
Sounds good. Again, click subscribe. Follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And again, like Mike said, you can see or listen to our stuff on podcast, Castbox. And thank you for watching. We will be back next week.
Going down, Collin.
Happy week 1, everybody.